Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first part of our lecture. We are jumping into talking about ethics and the role that ethics play, especially around having a professional code of ethics. Let's take a look at the differences. First we start thinking about why we behave the way we do, and that starts with our values, and those are personal understanding of what is important to us. From our values, we start building morals, so personal beliefs of what is right and wrong. And ethics is a little bit different than that in the sense that we're starting to use what we know about our values and our morals to decipher what is right and wrong, and then we kind of more globally apply it. And we have what we would call a professional code of ethics when we work with families. Some examples of how this would play out with actual belief system would be my value would be I value honesty. And from there, the moral around that would be my belief that it is important to tell the truth. And the ethics around that would be that you should communicate everything regardless of outcome. Now, is that ethical or not? And that's where you would get into deciphering. Even though I have a moral code, I have a moral understanding, and I have a value, ethics may not always line up to that. I can value honesty. I can have a moral that believes that you should always tell the truth. But the ethical component is that always universally applied? Is that always a right thing to do, regardless of the outcome? Okay, let's jump in a little bit more and talk about ethics. Ethics can be defined as the codes of conduct or moral principles recognized in a particular profession, sphere of activity, relationship, or other context or aspect of human life. A little bit different than that is professional ethics, professional and not personal understanding and determination of what is morally right and wrong and good and evil. So kind of taking what we know about what is the right thing to do and applying it to a profession so we all are living up to the same standard and the same expectation. We're all kind of playing by the same rule book. We're making decisions that are we agreed upon the best for the circumstances. And that's where the code of ethics comes in. So a code of professional ethics is agreed upon collective profession as the responsibilities to be carried out as a member. These things include what is right over what can be completed quickly, what is the best and not just what is practical and easy, and what actions are not acceptable ever. So we look at using our code of ethics to help us make decisions, but also to know what is never acceptable behavior. Okay, so it can tell us what's right, but also what is very wrong. All right, looking at why do we even bother with ethics? Why do we use them? What's the purpose? It gives us a clear expectations for behavior and actions as a professional. We have an understanding of the commonality shared amongst the group. So we understand what's expected of everybody who identifies as a teacher, everybody who identifies as a social worker. There's a certain code that we all follow. It provides moral commitments for those entering the profession. For people who are coming in new to being a teacher, it's a very baseline understanding of a foundation of this is expected from you from the get-go. It provides us assistance in making the best choice for those being served. A lot of times it can be conflicting, especially when we get into ethical dilemmas, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we are serving children and families, and sometimes we have to make decisions that are best for the child that may not be best for the family. And that's kind of where that dilemma piece gets in play. Or maybe we have to think about two separate families and how that works. But it gives us that assistance in making sure we are making the best choice when those things arise. It also articulates our professional core values. So, as a profession, we all hold near and dear certain things that we are trying to advance and advocate for. And those are our core values or our core beliefs. And it's going to also provide us understanding of responsibilities and obligations and ethical dilemmas. So going back to that piece around if we're not really sure what is the right or wrong decision, it gives us a very clear picture of the role we play within it and our responsibility, who our responsibility is to. Is our responsibility to our colleagues? Is our responsibility to families? Is our responsibility to children? Where do all of those things rank when we get stuck in a sticky situation? All right. A little bit more about what the purpose is. It supports professionals that take a necessary risk in supporting and advocating. If you work with families, there are going to be times where you have to take a stand against maybe the system as a whole, thinking about that macro system, right? So thinking about the rules and the laws that are in place. Sometimes making best choices for children and families mean you take a stand on a larger scale, whether that be a protest or writing a letter or being an advocate. And sometimes that also means that you're going to have to take a stand within your job. Occasionally, especially being a teacher, there might be a rule or a policy that is being pushed that may not be in the best interest of children. And you will have to take a stand to either at least say your piece or go against it. And so our ethics exists, our professional code of ethics exists to support you in knowing that you are doing the right thing. An example might be perhaps you're working in an elementary school and the principal would like to cut out 20 minutes of recess. And as a professional, you know that children need that time to move around. In that moment, you might need to take a stand and say what the children need. And that is a very simplified example, but it can be fearful if you're afraid of losing your job. So, again, why that's a simple example, it is an example of taking a stand when you're maybe not standing with everybody else and it's taking a risk. Okay. It also is reasoning for difficult decisions. Again, going back to the ethical decision making, when you're in a dilemma, you kind of have to reason through some of those things. Sometimes there's a huge gray area and it's not going to be exactly right or exactly wrong. So you're going to have to reason and really help work with others and reflect on what the right decision might be. It provides you assistance in coming up with decisions in difficult situations. It provides you information from outside the profession regarding beliefs and values. So you're not relying solely on what you believe, but also thinking about how people perceive you and perceive the profession. And it provides assurance that everybody working within the field is expected to engage in a certain manner. And these are things that show up everywhere we go for professionals. If we think about going to the doctor, there is a code of ethics we all assume they're going to follow when we go to a doctor's appointment. And if they didn't follow that code of ethics, it would be a violation of our understanding, a violation of our rights. And so that goes the same for teachers and social workers. There's an expected manner of behavior that makes people understand and also appreciate what's happening, hopefully. All right, moving forward a little bit. There's a lot of reasons why we would want to use the code of ethics, but there's also some necessity around it, why we need it. The first being that power and status. When you're working with children and families, especially children, they do not have power and status in the sense that they are not able to advocate for themselves or make decisions for themselves. So we have the code of ethics to help us work through some of those problems so we can advocate for them. We're making the best decisions for them. Another piece is recognizing that working with children and families means working with multiple clients with multiple different areas of need and circumstances. And when that happens, you're going to have to work through what is necessary and what they need in order to meet their best interest. Again, kind of going back to everybody's different, everybody needs something different. And that means that you might have a dilemma show up that's similar to a different family, but you might navigate it differently based on your code of ethics and based on your client. There's also going to be discrepancies in knowledge, understanding that working with families and what's expected of social workers and teachers and childcare workers can vary greatly from state to state and can also vary greatly from site to site, especially when you're looking at early childhood and childcare settings. And so when we have a code of ethics, we have this agreement that we're all working together towards the same things. We all value the same things, which gets a more comprehensive level of what to expect. And there's also plays into role ambiguity, the idea that we're all meeting the same expectations. And additionally, when you work with families, there's going to be instances where they are going to ask you to do things. And because you've built a positive relationship, you're going to want to do them, possibly. But the code of ethics can help you understand whether or not that actually is something that is your responsibility and you should be doing. So it creates a balance where you're able to exist in a professional, positive relationship, but also have some boundaries. Okay? All right, ethical dilemmas. Let's talk a little bit about that. An ethical dilemma is defined as a moral conflict that involves determining appropriate conduct when an individual faces conflicting professional values and responsibilities. Essentially, what this breaks down to is there's not a clear right or wrong. There can be conflicting benefit. Maybe if I do this, it benefits the family, but if I don't do it, it benefits the child. Or maybe if I do this, it benefits this family, but doesn't benefit that family. If I do this, it might benefit this colleague, but not this colleague. So there's kind of this push and pull where somebody's having benefit, but not everybody all the time. And occasionally it can be at odds with your personal moral code. Going back to this idea that we all have our own values, our own code. And sometimes that is going to have to be put kind of in check because we are there to serve the greater good, the families and the children as a whole. And we want to make sure there's not discrepancies between services. And occasionally your own moral code might interfere with that. And so going back to making sure we're making good decisions for the profession, for the children. Okay, so let's take a look at if you have a problem. How do you even know if it's an ethical dilemma? So you start with your problem and then you ask yourself, is it an issue of right or wrong? So for example, if it's something like, should I bring donuts to work on Monday morning? Does everybody like donuts? Should we all have donuts? That might be a problem, but it's not an issue of right or wrong, right? So you can generate a possible solution to that. If it is an issue of right or wrong, then you're going to ask yourself the next question. Is there a law? Do I have a lawful responsibility? And in this case, for the most part, if you do have a lawful responsibility, you're just going to follow the law. Now, I'm going to say a little caveat in the sense that there might be some policies that you don't agree with morally and maybe go against the code of ethics. And those things might be more of a gray area again. But when I'm saying follow the law, I'm thinking of things like child abuse. If you are a mandated reporter, there is a specific law for that. Follow the law. There is no ethical dilemma there. Okay, but if you don't have a law that guides your reasoning or your responsibility or even the problem to solve, then you're going to take a look at your ethical code of conduct. And if there is a specific ethical responsibility there, then you're just going to simply follow that. But if there's not, you're going to have an ethical dilemma. Okay, so now you have an ethical dilemma. Oh my gosh, what are you going to do, right? You're going to take a look at what is the dilemma exactly? What are the responsibilities within the dilemma? What am I expected to do? What is expected to have the outcome? What's the expectations in this dilemma? Then you can start generating possible solutions. Now, if you happen to generate a possible solution where everybody is happy, then great, you can stop right there. You've solved your problem, the ethical dilemma, done. However, if you can't come up with a solution that solves and everybody is happy, then you have to go back to your code of ethics and start prioritizing. See what is actually more important to value, what our code of ethics says for what is the most important piece. And then you consider the action. You think, okay, I have a problem. I think this is, I've talked it out. This is where the ethics say I should be solving it. This is what's most important ethically. Okay, if I do this action, I'm considering an action, is it morally justifiable? And if it is morally justifiable in the sense that, yes, you did the right thing, then you can implement and reflect on how it went. But if you go, okay, I have a considered action, I don't really feel like it's morally justifiable, though, to complete, then you have to go back and consider another action. Okay, let's talk about how this actually plays out. So, problem. Here's what we're going to say. Joey has been coming to school with bruises on his back. Parents report that Joey has been more physically active and jumping on the furniture and falling off. When you ask Joey about it, the bruises on his back, he states, "Mommy mad." So, is this an issue of right or wrong? Yeah, it does sound like there's a problem there that is an issue of right or wrong. He's getting hurt somehow. So we can't just generate a solution. We have to go ahead and think about, is there a law we have to follow? Now, as mandated reporters, even though families are telling us he's being more active, there's enough information here to have probable cause to report. And so, yes, we have to follow the law. We'd have to report this and make a child abuse report and let CPS decide whether or not it was warranted to follow up on. Okay, let's go over a couple more and just see how this plays out. Sophia has autism and her mom has mentioned her refusal to eat anything but French fries. Her mom mentions that she's exposing her to feeding therapy to desensitize her to other foods. She wants you to have Sophia touch and smell the other foods in her lunchbox before giving her the fries. When you attempt to, Sophia gags and begins to cry. So what's the problem? Mom wants one thing, but clearly Sophia is not enjoying it. Is this an issue of right or wrong? That first step right here. It is. It's an issue of right or wrong. Is there a law or a lawful responsibility? No, not really. But is it outlined an ethical responsibility? An ethical responsibility for people who are working with children is to do no harm. And you can argue that you're doing psychological harm by making Sophia touch and smell the food. Therefore, you could say, this is not an ethical dilemma. I'm sorry, I cannot do it. I'm going to follow the expectation. This is something that is for you to do at home if you want to, but I cannot do it at school. Okay. Here's another one. Hamza has recently started in the preschool program, and during nap time, he sings loudly to himself. The other children are having difficulty going to sleep and missing out on nap time. His parents report that part of his routine at home is to be sung to or sing in order to go to sleep. So do you have a problem? Yeah, you do, right? Is an issue of right or wrong? Well, kind of. Should Hamza be able to sing or not, right? Is there a law that tells us whether or not Hamza should be able to sing? No. Is there an ethical outlined responsibility about singing before you go to sleep? Nope. So we have an ethical dilemma. So let's go to the next page. Our dilemma is that some kids can't sleep and Hamza needs to sing in order to sleep. So we have this push and pull, right? Allowing him to sing, our kids are not sleeping, but not allowing him to sing means that he's not sleeping. My responsibility is to get everybody to go to sleep. Going down to generating possible solutions. Okay. Well, I think that if I put Hamza in a separate room with other children, with another adult, or shift his nap time a little bit so he starts going to sleep before the other kids, or possibly allow him to listen to headphones while he's going to sleep, then that would work. Now, does that make everybody happy? Is it a satisfactory solution for everybody? Yeah, so I solved it. So there's no need to go back to the code of ethics, okay? Let's go ahead and go to one more. Maria is a third grade student that has recently transitioned back from a non-public school. So if you don't know, you normally go to a non-public school if you have a lot of significant behaviors, things where you're not able to keep yourself safe or others safe. But she's transitioned back, meaning that they feel like she's okay to come back to a public school. She's in foster care. In her new classroom, she's taken to tearing items off the walls and walking around the classroom during instruction. Parents are expressing concern for their child's education. The teacher is spending large portions of her time working with Maria. So we know we have a problem. We know that there's not a law to follow it. We also know that there's not really an ethical code. We know that we need to keep children safe, but we also know we want to keep Maria in school. So we have a dilemma. Now, can we solve it with making a satisfactory solution for everybody? Possibly, but we really want to keep Maria in school. So we have to start thinking about our code of ethics. Is it ethical to pull Maria out of school? Is it ethical to keep her there? This is a true ethical dilemma, right? We don't want her hurting other kids. We don't want her being disruptive. We don't want her disrupting class. We don't want her taking away instruction from other children, but we also want to honor Maria's education and understanding that she comes from a background that needs a little bit more support and also more consistency. So to move her may not be the best thing for her either. So then we have to start considering actions. What are we going to do to support Maria? Are we going to give her extra support in the classroom? Are we going to have her ask for breaks? What are some things that would be morally justifiable? And once we get those things, we can implement and reflect on whether or not they're working. Okay. So as you can see, it's really not as straightforward as it seems. There are going to be lots of opportunities if you work with families to use the code of ethics and think about what is actually morally justifiable. Things that are having to do with you, things with colleagues, things with children, things with families, things between families. So it's good information to have. I know this lecture went a little bit long, so I really appreciate you